We welcome you to our monthly community night. Well, we're excited about this evening. Before I introduce our guests, let me just give you some upcoming events for the Civil Rights Institute. On February the 7th at 9:45, here will be a symposium in conjunction with Albany State University about the Civil Rights Movement and then the Albany Civil Rights Movement in particular. On February 23rd at 6:30 at Shiloh Baptist Church, we will have our Black History concert, which will be a combined choir of all the high schools and the Freedom Singers. And then on March 31st, we will have Dr. Khalil Chisholm from the Carter Institute, who will talk about the 50th anniversary of the March from Selma to Montgomery, the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, and the 60th year of the lynching of Emmett Till. He's an expert historian, so we invite you to come and join us. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. David Mosley. You know, time has a way of catching up with us, and this is a sign of our times. Some 30 years ago, he and I were in the same school system, but because of the nature of that school system, he at Pelham High and me at Mitchell County Training School, we did not communicate. We didn't know each other. So it took 30 years for us to come to Albany to develop a relationship, and it has been a great relationship. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you our Superintendent, Dr. David C. Mosley.
Mr. Frank's math is a little off. It was more like 50 or 40. I went to Pelham in 1965, straight out of college, and let's see, 65, 35, and 14 is 49 years, isn't it? Wow, boy. But anyway, those were some interesting times. This is a sidebar, but I went to Pelham as a young coach, straight out of college. Was hired on as a B-team coach, and my first job was $3,900 a year with a $500 coaching supplement, Terry. So I think that's $4,400. I got married a year later. I married a home ec teacher, and she had a federal supplement, so we were in big bucks with her salary added to my little meager salary. But the point I was going to make, this second year I was there, all the athletes graduated, and we had a really good team my first year, and nobody wanted the head coaching job. And they advertised all over South Georgia, and nobody would apply. So I got the job by default, Sheriff, and that's the truth. They gave it to me because nobody else wanted it. Well, we struggled for about 2 years, and then all of a sudden, Mr. Frank's school and the Pelham school had freedom of choice, where African American youngsters could go to where they wanted to, and they could go to the majority school if they so chose. And I had 2 African American athletes that came over. One, I'm proud, is a medical doctor today up in Americus, Dr. Fleming Burroughs, if any of you remember that. And so we integrated South Georgia in basketball. I had the first integrated team in 1967 of any school in South Georgia. I took the first African American kids into Baker County, Miller County, Dawson, Terrell County up north of here, Blakely, Miller County, Bainbridge, and all parts around, Cairo. I can name them all if I had time. And one of the interesting things was that I remember most schools were respectful at that time. They didn't like the point that you were there, but they respected, I guess, what kids were all about, except in Miller County. And I was coaching there one night, and Dr. Burroughs, who I call him now, the more they raised hell, the harder he played. And I always told him, I said, you play hard and let me do the arguing and do the fighting. And he was putting on quite a show that night. And I was watching, basketball is like a tennis match, and I was coaching, and all of a sudden I felt this thing. Back then we wore coats and ties to ball games, and I felt my tie tightening up, and this guy twisted me from the back, and he said, you didn't have to put that GD word in there. And by that time, the football coach, who had never sat with me on the bench in my life that night, he had two sons that played, and he played at University of Alabama. He was about 6'4" and about 240. And he jumps up and he runs over and grabs that guy, and he said, I'm going to throw you about 6 rows back in those stands if you don't turn him loose. And he did, and the police escorted him out of the gym. And I straightened my tie up, and we beat the living stuff out of him. We turned it on him bad then. And so when the game was over, it was a little hostile, as you can imagine. The principal came over to me and said, you take those kids, when you get them dressed, there's a back door out there, and you go and you take them out, pull your bus around, take them out the back door. And I was a little coach now, and I'm talking to a principal, a figure of authority. And I didn't use these exact words because I was mad by that time, and I was red-headed and hot-headed too. And I said, sir, we came in that such and such front door, and we going out that front door. And if you let somebody put a hand on one of my kids, I'm going to come after you. And we got out of there. And that was really the only hostile situation that we heard the barbs and the racial stuff, but that was the only really ugly thing. We had a brick thrown through the windshield over in Randolph County. But I've been through some of those times that you have read about, some of you have experienced, and it's not all a African-American thing. There's some white folks that walked the walk too back during those days, and it was a experience I value now. I didn't particularly like it then, but I've also seen lily white board members walk African-American children in the school side by side back then to make sure that they were protected and that they reached out. But that's not why I'm here tonight. I'm here to talk about the Dougherty County Board of Education, but I just wanted you to know I've been there and done that. And my friend, Mr. Jack Willis back here, he was he dated me a little bit, and he can relate and has been there too. These young guys, they had it made. They didn't have to experience any of that stuff, but overt, but not the kinds of things that we dealt with. I want to begin by telling you how proud I am to be here, how much I value my job, and how much I appreciate the fact that many of you, like Mr. Frank and others, have reached out to help me. We inherited a struggling school district a couple of years ago, but I knew then, is more than ever now, that there were so many good people here that were being dragged down by the actions of just a few and getting labeled in the news media and in the other media as just being terrible. And there were terrible things that went on. But there were so many good people here that were working hard, doing their jobs, and they wanted to do the right things, but when they saw their cohorts, a few handful, and I might add just a handful, slacking off, just getting by, doing wrong things, and after a while, if you're not really driven to be good at what you do, you finally say, why am I busting my rear end and these other folks getting the same check, and I'm fighting hard and they're slacking off, and is it worth it? But the good people stayed the course, and I've always been one that I don't care what you do or somebody else does. I want to be good at what I do, and recognized as good at what I do, and know that that's not going to happen always. But we began by putting a great team together, and we have been successful because of the Ken Dyers, the Ufot Ingangs, Jack Willis's, and many others that we've assembled together that are driven for success and know what they're doing. It's easy to be a hard worker, but you got to also know a little bit to be a hard worker. And when you get that combination together, you can get something done. I'm going to share a few of the success stories that we've experienced so far, and then I'm going to let Mr. Dyer talk about finances. He's the man that handles all of our money, has done an excellent job, and I can't tell you how much I value not only his experience but his friendship. Dr. Ingang's the same in his area of expertise, curriculum. He'll talk with you a few minutes about the good things that are going on. And Mr. Willis, if you want to say something, Jack Willis is the oldest working educator in Georgia, and I'm probably the second oldest. But he's got me a couple of years, but we have worked together in a number of fix-it opportunities, and he's sort of been my right hand and my confidant, and he really knows, and he's cool and thinks things out and gives me good advice. A couple of things I'll talk about sports just a little bit, and I should begin with academics, but that's what I already put on the front page. But as you know, we've got some good basketball here in Albany, and being an old basketball coach, I certainly enjoy seeing our teams perform. The archery team, I didn't know a lot. I don't shoot a bow and arrow, I shoot a rifle, Sheriff, and I'm a good shot. You don't want me shooting at you. But the archery team at Lake Park went up to LaGrange for a tournament last week, and they took the first place, the second place, and the third place in the boys. And then the girls, they took the first, the second, and the third. So apparently we've got a lot of good archers out at Lake Park. One of the things I'm really proud of in relation to test scores, and Dr. Ingham may talk a little about this, but our system as a whole gained 6.8 points last year on the CRPI exam, with 4 of our schools just really shooting the moon. Lamar Reese gained 19 points, almost 20, 19.8. Martin Luther King gained 20. Martin Luther King at one time was our lowest performing school, and that's a tribute to a staff and a principal that got it together and is working hard. Lincoln gained 11.5 points, and Lake Park was the overall highest score in the elementary school with 93.2. You may not know this, but something that Albany can really be proud of, and particularly considering our demographics. Robert Cross Middle School is one of the top 10 middle schools in the state of Georgia. Now think about that. I'm talking about Atlanta, Metro Atlanta, Gwinnett, Cobb, all these places that you read about having these great school systems. But they scored 98.6 on a 100-point scale. Mary Akers and Robert Cross exceeded the growth targets in social studies and reading. Our middle school gifted program posted 100% meets or exceeds test results for all students in all subject areas. The SIG Grant, School Improvement Grant, I don't like to use acronyms, but SIG stands for School Improvement Grant. They give you a lot of money in a struggling school to get it right. If you don't get it right, you're doomed forever. Our first SIG school was Albany High School. Albany High School is it 2 or 3 years?
3.
3. They're in their 3rd year this year. 2. They finished last year. they have moved to our #1 high school. And Dougherty and Monroe are not far behind. They are in their first year of SIG Grants, and we expect this same initiative and success rate coming from them. They had a 10% graduation rate improvement last year. And if we can continue to do that, I want to see our graduation rate around 90%. Right now it's in the 60s, and that's unacceptable. And you know that, and I know that. We had a 92% pass rate in the high school writing test. We have more than 150 students that are dual enrolled. That is, they're receiving academic credit at high school as well as college credit. We have a year-long process going right now with a strategic plan to develop that plan, and that's a long-range roadmap for our system that will hopefully lead us to make some wise decisions. We have been meeting twice a month with State Department officials and other outside resources in guiding us to develop this plan. I might mention on a survey we did recently the challenges. Hey, Doctor, how you doing, Dr. Grant? Fine, good to see you. I might mention the things that we identified as our greatest challenges, and I don't think this will be a rocket science or a real shock to you. Number one is we just don't have the parent involvement that we need, and I don't know if I knew of strategies that would really help that, I'd write a book and make $1 million or $2 million and move on down the road. But we have got to get more parent involvement. Now, I do see more involvement in our younger parents. I think it's on the upswing, but it's not near where we need to be. The second is the same thing that the sheriff back there deals with, is discipline. Adults that are not disciplined and make bad decisions wind up with the sheriff. Students that make bad decisions wind up in in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, or gone forever, which we don't like and don't need. But our students do have to behave better, and I'm telling you, for one, that I'm going to ride the road with a teacher or a principal that's trying to maintain good order in their schools, because it all starts with that. The third was our reading levels. We have to do a better job of teaching our children to read and teaching them by the 3rd grade. All the research that I've read, and you know and I know, that if they don't read by the 3rd grade well, they really increase their chances of being a dropout. And the thing that money will take care of in Dougherty County is to class size reduction. We can't put 25 kids in a kindergarten class with one teacher and one aide with some of the poverty level children that we deal with and all the baggage that they bring to school, and expect that teacher to produce the kind of students that we need over the long haul. We have got to lower that pupil-teacher ratio to about 15-1. One other thing that I'm really proud of, we changed principals at Albany Middle School a couple of years ago. Sent a dynamic, young, energetic principal there by the name of Eddie Johnson. They were on the state at-risk category, meaning that they were on the bad list for the State Department of Education. And in 2 years, we have been released. They're no longer an at-risk school. And that's a credit not to him as a leader only, but to he and the staff that he put together and the hard work that they did. That's about it for my part. Again, I want to tell you how much I appreciate the opportunity of you being allowing me just to be here. I enjoy what I do, or I wouldn't do it. I'm glad to be your superintendent. I want to make a difference with my staff, and they do, and we're all hungry for achievement. And you can carry that to the bank. So I'm going to call, if you don't have any questions, or we'll take those later. I'll call on Mr. Dyer to tell you about how much money we got in the bank. And it's good.
Thank you, Dr. Mosley, and good evening. Just a quick overview of our finances and then a couple of things we've done over the last few years and what our outlook is over the next 12 months. Of course, we have about 15,000 students in the Dougherty County school system. Our general fund budget is about $121 million. Our overall budget, which includes capital projects, grants, and our school nutrition fund and athletics, is about $194 million. We're sitting on about $9.7 million in reserves or savings in our general fund, and overall with our capital fund and our enterprise fund, about $76 million in reserves. So we're in a pretty healthy position. That sounds like a lot of money, except when you have to spend about $1 million or so every month, but it goes pretty quickly. But with good management and good conservative decision making, I think we'll be okay. Some of the highlights in terms of finance, about 5 years ago we had 10 furlough days. This year, with superintendent's leadership and the board's leadership, we've gotten that down to 2 furlough days for our teachers and 4 furlough days for everyone else. And we are committed to reducing that again this year. Also, 5 years ago, we had to reduce the number of school days to 177. I'm glad to say this year we restored that to a full 180, and we don't plan on going backwards again on that one. School nutrition, that's another area that I supervise. For some time, we've had universal free breakfast, even when I think we started that when Dean Grant was on the school board. Last year, we started universal free lunch. Every student in the Dougherty County school system gets lunch for free. And that's important because some of our kids, the only time they get, and that's true, I mean, it doesn't sound good, but it's the truth, some of them don't get good nutritious meals unless they're at school because of the financial situations at home. So we're proud of that fact. And we start this year, start next month, as a matter of fact, we're going to roll out our third meal, a free dinner for every student in the school system. Starting at our elementary schools, we're going to start with 7 elementary schools this year. We're going to move to the other elementary schools next year, then move to middle and high. And so some students in the Dougherty County school system will get breakfast, lunch, and dinner at school. And that's huge when it comes to some of these families. One thing we did, we looked at our kitchen equipment, and we sit on a healthy fund balance, and even the finance guy knows that it's not good to have too much money in your pocket. So we want to use that money to upgrade our systems. Last year we bought new equipment for all of our kitchens, upgraded all the equipment. If you haven't been to Monroe High School, you'll see a 5-station food court. You'll see one coming up at Dougherty very shortly. So the kids have multiple choices of food. We're going to have a vending machine for those on the run. They can get a nutritious meal from the vending machine, and it counts as you get all 4 food groups, and they can get it on the run and go sit out in the courtyard and cram for that test without having to wait in line to get their lunches. So that's big as well. Next thing we're doing with school nutrition, I think 8 of our schools are going to get a remake of their cafeteria. We're going to get new furniture, new furnishings, and new signage in about 8 of our kitchens, 8 of our cafeterias this year, with the rest coming next year. The next area I supervise is technology. I'm sure, unless you've not been in Albany for the last year, you've heard about the one-to-one initiative that we're doing. Dr. Yang may talk a little bit more about that, but beginning in February, we're going to begin to roll out our phased deployment of tablets, starting at Albany Middle School. And then we'll go from school to school after that until we've deployed all of the ones for phase 1. And then next year we'll do phase 2. And by the end of next year, all of our schools will have each student will have a tablet in their hand to facilitate instruction. Capital projects is another area. We're finishing up our renovations at Dougherty High School, $16 million renovation at Dougherty High School. It'll look like a new school when we're finished. I'm excited about going on a tour of Dougherty High School next week to see the finishes of it. We're supposed to be done about April or May, and then we're going to get the furnishings in and have it ready for school to start in August. Also, Monroe, the next big project that we have, the groundbreaking on that $30 million project will start this summer. And so we're really excited about that. And I hate to call it a renovation because I think everything at Monroe is going to be new except the auditorium. Considering phase 1 that we just completed several years ago, with the exception of the auditorium, everything at Monroe is going to be new, including a 2,000-seat gymnasium as well as a auxiliary gymnasium that'll be attached to it. So we're really excited about the things going on at Monroe. Our outlook. The governor's budget is very promising. Last year, he reduced the austerity cuts. We've suffered probably $90 million in austerity cuts over the last decade, just line item reductions in the budget because of funding. Last year, he restored $314 million in the budget, which meant a $3 million increase for Dougherty County. This year, he's proposed in his budget a $280 million increase or decrease in the austerity, which should amount to about a $2.5 million increase in Dougherty County. So we're excited about that. Over the last 2 years, he's included an additional $500 million just to reduce the austerity cuts. So we're pleased about that. We do have some challenges, of course. Our tax digest continues to be flat at best, with prices of everything else going up. We have a decline in student enrollment. We dropped a little bit in our student enrollment, so that's going to impact our funding from the state. But with the fund balance that we talked about, and with the superintendent's leadership and the board's leadership, I think we'll be in pretty good shape in the years to come. I don't want to talk about too much because I think you know what you want to ask me. So if you want to ask me any questions, I'll be glad to answer those. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time telling you things that you may not want to know. So I don't know if we're going to take those now or take those at the end.
Come back at the end of that document.
And then we'll be here. All right.
Good evening. Dr. Mosley has actually said most of what I wanted to say tonight, but I will share just make a few other comments. He talked about the improvement in achievement in our schools. That's because we've taken a lot of steps to put protocols in place, policies, processes that go to demand accountability part of our teachers and principals. We are holding ourselves accountable for our children's success. We are demanding to do a whole lot better job tracking our kids towards graduation. And so when kids enter our schools today, we are closely monitoring their progress to make sure that they're not falling behind. That we change the culture where we do not care to one that cares and follows that child, precisely watching what they're doing and providing timely interventions for those children to be successful. We have a high dropout rate, as we know, and so we must do a better job to make sure that we're tracking our kids and providing these interventions in a timely fashion. So we're investing quite a bit on early education, early intervention. We've added EIP teachers to work with our kids right from kindergarten through elementary, middle, high. We are investing in what we call response intervention, that every child who is struggling is receiving a timely intervention so that they do not fall through the cracks. We are raising expectations for our kids. We are revising curriculum to make it much more rigorous in line with what they will be seeing on the Georgia milestones. And some of you have heard about the Georgia milestones, the new assessment system that's coming in place this school year. And I'll be glad to come back at some point and share with parents what that will entail. We'll be glad to be here to do that. 2 years ago when we came on board, the achievement gap between the state, the CCRPI, and Dougherty County school system was 14 points. It's a 14 points gap. We gave ourselves 3 years to close that gap. And I'm glad to say 2 years down the road, we've reduced that gap to 5. And I'm almost certain that, in a year's time, that gap will disappear. And that's our goal. In fact, we don't just want it to disappear, we want to exceed the state average. And we're not going to rest until that happens. We are increasing our collaboration with our colleges, with Albany State, with Darton College, with Albany Tech. Dr. Mosley talked about the dual enrollment program. We have about 170 kids who are dual enrolled with Albany State, Albany Tech, and Darton College. We may have about 10 students who will be graduating this year with an associate's degree and a high school diploma at the same time. And those numbers keep going up every year. We don't just want the brightest kids to be dual enrolled. We want to spread it, across board to every child. And we believe we can do so. And so we intend to increase that number every single year. We have our kids enrolled at Albany Tech coming out learning skills, having the skills to go to work immediately. And that's part of what we are trying to reduce the dropout rate, to give our kids something to do, make them productive citizens, contributing members of society by the time they finish high school. I was at a Dropout Prevention conference today in Columbus, learning ways to stem the tide of dropout. I'm sure you've heard about the CCPLC that we opened about a year ago for that reason, to prevent dropout. Those high school kids that are on the verge of dropping out, we arrest them and give them something to hope for. And right now we have almost half of them, they're about 65 of them right there, about half of them are dual enrolled at Albany Tech. The goal is to have all of them dual enrolled with Albany Tech or with Albany State or Darton College. And we believe we can make it happen. We will, Dr. Mosley talked about, I'm not sure, no, but next school year, the system will be a charter system. We're getting charter. We've already filed papers with DOE that come July, that will become a charter system, which means all of our schools will be allowed the flexibility to do things a little bit differently. In other words, they're not going to be controlled solely from downtown, where we prescribe what's going to happen at every school. Dr. Mosley will be sharing his authority with school councils, governing councils, so that those schools will be free to do things, to be innovative, find solutions to problems that will address their schools specifically. So we kind of release those powers from downtown, because we don't have all the answers. Like he said, Eddie Johnson, for example, a dynamic principal at Albany Middle, we set him loose. Go and do what you feel is right for your building. Same for the rest of them. And we want to see how competitive they can be, how innovative they can be. And also it empowers the parents, because on that governing council, we're going to have not just the principal and teachers, we're going to have parents. We're going to have community members. We're going to have business community as part of that council. And so we expect that there will be a whole lot of parental input. Now you can make claim this is your building and have a say as to what happens at those schools. So I'm excited about what's going to happen next school year with the charter system. Mr. Diaz already talked about the one-to-one, which is huge. It's a $14 million project. We're excited about it. We feel that it will change the way we do business in Dougherty County. We're trying to personalize instruction to give every child the power to lead their learning, to claim ownership of their learning. We're talking with several groups to allow for internet access at home. And we'll come to some resolution to make that happen for our kids, that when they get home, learning continues, 24/7 events. It's not just at the school, at the school building, that they can go home and continue learning. A lot of them are hungry to accelerate their learning, move beyond what is being offered in the classroom. We want to offer them those opportunities. We are changing the culture of our schools. Culture of responsibility, taking ownership of our kids, where we believe that we have to work as a team to make things happen for our kids, and we have to go beyond the call of duty to make things happen for our children. That culture is beginning to take roots in our schools, and I'm proud of that. And so we have something that we call caring adults in the building. Every adult, custodians, CNS workers, the teachers, the principals, they take ownership of the kids in the building and make sure that they're successful. We have what we call the PBIS, Positive Behavior Intervention System, also for the same reason, to change the culture where we make the school a much more warming and welcoming environment for success for our kids. That we're making data-driven decisions, that data guides what we do, even with teachers, that they react and use data to plan instruction. We are on a massive scale. Of course, we know to retain good teachers, you have to train them. It's ongoing. And we're having a massive training process in place right now, where all of our teachers are undergoing professional development to increase their skills, of course, improve their skills, make them much more effective teachers. And of course, we are making every effort to keep them because they're effective. We're increasing the collaboration practice between elementary, middle, and high schools. We feel that if we do that, we're setting our kids up for success. That there should be collaboration, extensive collaboration between high schools, with middle schools, and elementary schools to give those kids a chance to be successful. That we are demanding accountability at every level so that a child will transition successfully from elementary to middle to high, given that partnership and that collaboration. I could go on and on and on, but I think I'll stop there. But you can see we are changing the way we do business in Dougherty County schools, and I'm very, very proud to be part of that process. We call it the three R's: rigor, relevance, and relationships. We emphasize that every single day. So thank you again. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to entertain. I believe.
Excuse me, may I ask one?
Yes.
That I'm curious about. The moving to the charter system. You're talking about having individual governing boards
For every school.
All 23s. How many people will make up that board? And could that not be difficult, kind of like herding cats?
Right now, we're in the process of determining how many members will be. We've actually decided. There's a team working on that right now. There will be 7 members per school, and we have. And you can please get the word out. It's coming because we'll be looking for some strong quality people who will be committed to serve on those boards for those schools. So we are hoping that through this process, we're planning some community forums, about 3 or 4 community forums, to get the word out and get people interested to serve on those boards. We are hoping that we'll have a large pool of people.
You're going to need 161.
Right.
And we will push, and we'll have that discussion. We'll try to get them out. That's right.
One of the things we talked about yesterday, and this is not carved in stone, all of this is still up for debate. But if we had, for example, Mr. Fullerton there, I don't know where he lives, but if he lived in the Westover district, but they had their 7, but he really wanted to serve, and we could use him in one of our underprivileged schools that could not come up with enough, we could flip-flop. You wouldn't, in other words, you wouldn't have to live in the zone of the school to serve on that board.
Who's going to coordinate?
If you had,
Who's going to coordinate this?
that'll be coordinated in town, and probably with a hired person that will be the guru of the charter school.
It's going to take that probably.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
This is my second stint in Albany in Dougherty County. My first one was in 1962. I was a teacher here. Folk, we want you to understand that we understand everybody hasn't bought into what we're doing. We know that. A lot of people have. The reason being for that is one of the things that happened here better than about 2 years ago was when the school district brought Dr. Mosley in here. And this is not a how great we are session right here, right now. I just want to tell you really how it is in there. The reason they did was because this guy has the knack of diagnosis. Mr. Fullerton, that's what we need. And then when we go to a doctor, we don't want somebody who just has the ability to write the prescriptions. What we were looking for is a correct diagnosis. And this guy has that. I met him in 1974 in there, and we've worked together off and on since then. Mr. Dyer is not one of the best people I've worked with. He is the best finance man that I've worked with, and I've been in this business since 1960. If he could grow hair and could slow his speech down a little bit, he'd be close to perfect. And Dr. Ing Yang, I don't know what we're going to do to get him climatized here. But I'll tell you this, I have never worked with a better curriculum person than this guy, and his energy level and his expectation is totally off the chart. He does not understand or comprehend the phrase, "I'm sorry, we can't do that," because he puts it out there and he expects it to be done. That's the folk that you have working in your school district now who are trying to pave the way for a better system here. We strongly believe and we preach super schools are made up of super adults. Mom and Dad, that may not be the first thing you want to hear. But if you want your kids to begin to make some progress and some things happen and things all of a sudden begin to shine, then you look to whom are they being exposed to during the course of the day. And super schools are made up of super adults. We believe that, we preach that, we practice that. And there. Some things that you don't know about and you won't read about in the paper because we don't talk about it. And I'll just give you 2 or 3 of these examples. Last week it came to our attention that we had in a school a teacher that's missed 117 days in the last 2.5 years. How do you explain to the parent, "I'm sorry, but your child's not going to learn anything this year because we have a person on the payroll who doesn't come to work"? Well, because of the profession that we're in, we have hoops that we have to jump through in order to correct these things. We can't always just up and say, "I'm sorry you didn't come to work for the last 2 or 3 weeks, and there you're out of here." We can't do that. So I said, "Folks, we have to do something about this." I talked with Dr. Yang. He said, "This is not working." I talked with the superintendent, and he gave me his standard answer: "Go fix it." I talked with the man with the shiny head. Here. I said, "I need money for a teacher because we have a classroom over here where the kids in kindergarten are getting nothing, and we can't waste another 90 days in there." He said, "Fix it." Yesterday we put a full-time teacher in there. The teacher who comes occasionally, she'll work occasionally and get paid occasionally. But see, you don't see those things in there. Also on my plate is what's called a police department. I don't like that term, sheriff, for schools. I prefer school resource officer. I think that's who we ought to be. We have started the practice and we have preached this and preached this. The blowback we've gotten, basically, interestingly enough, has been from some of our principals, is that every situation that develops in a classroom in our school does not require calling the police and arrest. Is that what we need to do is to work more, Mr. Fullerton, the way we did. See, I taught this guy in school. I know y'all think, "My God, how old are you?" I hope I pass away in a schoolhouse somewhere. I hope I can work that long. But you see, we believe and we're practicing, and we're not only preaching, but we're practicing that, hey, if something is wrong in the classroom, don't call the police, fix it. Because we all have a right to make a mistake. You don't have a right to sink a ship, but you have a right to make a mistake. If you sink the ship, it's our fault. See, we need to correct it before then. One of the things that was a critical issue when Dr. Mosley brought me in a couple of years ago, he said, "I need for you to work in transportation." I thought, for heaven's sakes, what have I done wrong? And he put me in that barrel. You don't read this in the paper, but school was out for 2.5 weeks. We're coming back to school on what, January 5? I think January 5 is when we started back. School had been out for 2.5 weeks. On the Friday before we came back on Monday, our mechanics went out and cranked every bus. I want to suggest to you 2 years ago they would have done that. We'll wait until school starts on Monday to see who cranks. On Sunday before we opened up, several of them went back out, and those that were suspect, they reworked on them again in there. Did it go squeaky clean and perfect on Monday the 5th? No. But it was better. And that's what we're working at. You don't see that in the paper, but we want you to know, folk, that that's who we are and that's what we're doing in there. And in closing, Dr. Mosley mentioned the parental involvement. I don't know where we're going with that. I really don't. And a lot of you sitting in here and you're going to, I know you can relate to what I'm saying. I basically was reared by my grandmother. If it were not for her, I probably would be in an orange jumpsuit somewhere. We have to have more of that. There's a website that if you're interested in particularly you young folk, go on the website and click in there, Berry's Eagles. There's a college, Martha Berry College up there, and they have webcam on some eagles that have built a nest in there. They mate for life. How unusual. Day before yesterday, and the mom has been sitting on 2 eggs now for 2 weeks. The father, the male eagle, brings her food. She gets off the eggs and eats, and he sits on the nest. Mom and Dad and Grandpa and Grandma, why is it that they know how to take care of their young even before they're born, and we have our colleagues walking up and down the street out here that won't walk across the street to get involved in their children's education? Somehow or other, we've got to get that word out and say, look, if you can't, let's quit doing it like humans and let's go back and do it like some of the animals, because they take care of their young from the very beginning. And that we cannot do that when we only have your child during the course of a year about 7.5% of the time. You have them the rest of the time, or as some folks say, well, they're out on the street. Well, that's your fault. We need some help there. We admit to you we don't have all the answers, but we need your help for that. I thank you so much for letting me come, and I thank the Board of Ed, I thank the Superintendent and my colleagues for working for who you are and for what you are, and thank you so much for letting us come. Thank you.
They have a tracking device, Dr. C.W., in those tablets that they can be located anywhere in the world, we're told. You want to elaborate on that?
That's basically it. It's a GPS tracking device called CompuTrace, and we have a command center set up at Isabella, and we have a screen, and we put the number of that device in. We can tell you to the address and pinpoint a location for that device anywhere in the world.
Excellent.
Yes, and if some, we think that nothing's going to go wrong. Somebody's going to try to do the wrong thing with it, and we understand it. And when it goes to the pawn shop, we're going to track it down. We're going to find out who took it to the pawn shop, and they're going to get arrested. And we're going to publicize it. Because people need to know there are going to be consequences to doing the wrong thing with those devices. But I don't think we're going to have much of that. We do anticipate some mischief, but we're prepared for it.
Let me elaborate on that, and we'll take that question. One of the things, I think I read this in the squawk box, Terry, that all the children, they'll be playing frisbees with them and throw them here and there and everywhere and won't take care of them. But my comment to that is that if we can help 90% of the children and we lose 10% of those iPads, it will be a success story. Now, I don't want to lose any, but we know that some things are going to go wrong, but you think about the majority of the children that we can help. And I've never worked in any situation where there was no pain that came with gain. Have you, Sheriff? You're going to have to give to get. And we accept that and want to apologize if we lose a few, but we won't lose many. Yes,
as I mentioned, we're having a rollout at Albany Middle School next month. But prior to that, we have extensive training by an organization called the One-to-One Institute. The first training.
It's training for whom?
The first training is for the teachers, because we understand that the teachers still have to teach. The tablet is a tool that will allow us to personalize the learning for each student. But we understand it's a paradigm shift in the way teachers instruct. So we have a group that specializes in one-to-one initiatives and providing professional learning for those teachers. Then once the teachers are trained, and that starts, I think we're gonna have that January 31st, is that Saturday, next Saturday? They're gonna have the training for teachers throughout the school district. We're also gonna, and principals, right? And we're also gonna have people embedded in the schools when we roll these devices out to assist them with any technical difficulties they may have when they first start. We're gonna have an orientation with the students to let them know the features that are available with the tablet, the web-based instruction that we're gonna be using. So they'll be trained as well. The parents, before we roll the tablets out, the parents are gonna have to come through an orientation and sign an agreement about the computer adequate use of the computers or appropriate use of the computers and the devices. So we're gonna provide training to parents, students, and teachers. And it's gonna be ongoing training throughout this year and next. We have some organizations that provide after-school tutorial support for kids. And so what we committed to then was providing them with an orientation. If they make a request, we don't know who all the organizations are, but as part of our public information campaign, when we get ready to roll this out, we're gonna provide information for those organizations and individuals who are interested in what we're doing and how to assist students after school and on weekends like they're doing now. We're gonna provide them with training as well. They won't get a tablet, but they'll know how the tablet operates. So when a student comes with the lesson, you'll know how to navigate through those things. And to answer your question, we're writing a grant. We wrote one last year, didn't get funded, it was too large. This year we're gonna break it up in the 4 phases. $11 million investment into community-wide Wi-Fi that'll be provided by the school system. We have to comply with the Child Internet Protection Act when we provide it, and the network, the wireless network that we're gonna provide for the community will be CIPA, they call it CIPA compliant. Each student will have a login and password, and you can only have one person on that login and password at a time. So if I decide to give my login and password to my cousins who are not in school because they want to be able to get on the internet, when I get home to do my work, I won't be able to get on because they're already on it. And that'll only take me one time to realize that I need to keep my password to myself, and then they'll be able to do it. Now that's not going to happen this year. That's for next year. But what students will be able to do is, even if they don't have access to the internet at home, we can push the lessons out to each tablet through what we call the Service Center Client Manager. And so for the teacher can send the lessons to the tablets while they're at school. So when they get home, they have offline access to those lessons. So experience, first of all, what we're gonna do is we're gonna use a new approach, a new delivery method called Construction Manager at Risk. Before we use the traditional design, bid, build process, and that's a much longer process. We're looking at a construction manager at risk delivery method at Monroe. And what we'll do is, sometime in the month of February, we're going to release a request for proposals for qualified general contractors / construction managers. They're going to propose what they can do in terms of the building, and they'll negotiate with subcontractors. It doesn't have to be a hard bid for the subcontractors. If they can meet our price, the construction manager's price, then they'll be able to do the job. They have to have references, and they have to have quality references because we want quality work, but they won't require them to be bonded for some of these projects because they'll be under the construction manager's bond. So it's easier access for those small businesses. And what you can do is, even now, go talk to either our construction department, facilities department, Bob Fowler, Christian Wilkerson, or Jason Renfro in our purchasing department, and get a vendor application and apply and say that you want to be informed when we have construction opportunities available, and then you'll be automatically advised when those opportunities present themselves. Not just on the buildings I mentioned, but anytime we have any construction.
Because they'll take ownership of their learning and push themselves, go beyond what is being offered in the classroom. So we should expect to see increase, and research is there, it's coming out, that technology, this kind of technology, one-to-one, actually, promotes student achievement. So we expect to see that happening, not the other way around. I'm optimistic about that.
Let me just insist that you believe this. We're from the old school, and there's nothing going to take the place of that classroom teacher. That's number one. These iPads are number two, as auxiliary help or enhancements or add-ons. The classroom teacher is key to those children and other children's success, how good they are. And if we can put a Teacher of the Year in every classroom, which we won't be able to do that, but we can strive for that. If we can put a good teacher in every classroom, children in Dougherty County or anywhere else are going to learn.
Because we know in 5 years, all the assessments, Georgia Math, will be online. And so if we get our kids ready right now, we'll be way ahead of the game. We will actually be transitioning to ourselves within the district, putting our assessments online, but start getting used to that. And research shows when students take assessments online, they do better than traditional way. It's been proven. We have the data to show that. So, the fact is this: we can't keep teaching kids the traditional way. That's because our children have changed. We are talking about kids who are growing up in a different time, different era. So we have to navigate, we have to meet them the way they learn, and they are using technology to drive instruction. We have to adapt accordingly, or else we'll be left behind.
We're going to have to emphasize safety. That's part of the orientation of the students. The practices that you need to use in terms of awareness and all that. But again, if someone takes that tablet, we're going to know who has it. And if anybody does anything to one of our kids, it's like Dr. Mosley said when he was at the basketball game, if you let somebody touch one of my kids, you're going to have to deal with me. Now, if they touch one of these kids and take that tablet, they're going to have to deal with us, and they're not going to want to have
I want to thank all of you for coming, Dr. Mosley, Dr. Yang, Mr. Dyer, Jack. We appreciate you coming. We appreciate your audience. In closing, I'd like to leave you with this little tidbit. And it was a joke that says that, right after a hard rain, a traveling salesman was going down a muddy road, and his car slipped off in the ditch, and a farmer happened to see him and saw his predicament and took his mule over to pull the car out of the ditch. Well, when he got over to the car, he hitched up his mule and said to the mule, "Jack, Blackie, Bossy, Bill, pull." And the old mule put a hump in his back and pulled the car out. The salesman thanked the farmer, but asked him, said, "Why did you call the mule so many names?" He said, "Well, the old mule is blind. I didn't want to think he was pulling by himself." I say that because as we see what our school officials are doing, as a community, we cannot let them feel like they're pulling by themselves. And with that, I would say good evening, and we'll see you on February 23rd at Shiloh Baptist Church.